Before we go on any further, let me tell you what else is happening on the CISO series. On Security You Should Know, the fastest way to learn about new security solutions, we have Exploring Storage Control with ThreatLocker. Also, on our latest episode of Defense in Depth, what new risks does AI introduce? We know there are a lot. How many are there, and what do we have to be aware of? You can hear it all on the CISO series. And to subscribe, just go to CISOseries.com/subscribe.
Biggest mistake I ever made in security. Go.
Can't believe I'm admitting this, but right before vacation, I ended up blocking an entire top-level domain, co.uk, from my work specifically. So anybody trying to go to any UK sites that were commercial, they were blocked. And that was on the day before I went on vacation. They were blocked for 24 hours. That was in my early days.
It's time to begin the CISO Series podcast.
Welcome to the CISO Series podcast. My name is David Spark. I'm the producer of the CISO Series. And joining me as my co-host since episode number 1, it's Mike Johnson, the CISO of Rivian. Mike, say hello to the audience.
Hello, audience. Great to be with you yet again.
By the way, for those of you who don't think that he's talking to you, he is. He's talking specifically to you.
I'm talking to you in particular. Thank you.
Yes. We're available at CISOseries.com. If you don't spend at least half your day there.
What are you doing even?
What are you doing? I don't know. Our sponsor for today's episode, a phenomenal sponsor of the CISO series, it is ThreatLocker, Zero Trust Endpoint Protection Platform. That's ThreatLocker. More about just that a little bit later in the show. So before we came on air, I was sort of telling a little bit of my history in tech media, and our guest, who I'll introduce in a second, remembers me from that. So I was on the early days of ZDTV, and I was also on Tech TV on many of the programs there. But for those of you who ever listened to that network, which lasted a total of 6 years, it was all about computers and the internet.
It's a good run.
Fascinating thing. So who would have thought that people would be interested in watching videos about computers and the internet? That was the theory back then. Anyways, went from 1998 is when it launched to 2004, I believe, is when it ended. I wrote the first 30 minutes that ever appeared on the network, and I was the second voice ever heard. And what you heard is like a person narrating what the network was going to be. And then you hear me saying, like talking the sound of a doctor saying, it's a brand new network, like it's like a baby boy. And the idea was they took out a baby, but it had a giant red block on its head, which was the ZDTV logo at the time.
Nice. I had no idea. That's really cool.
So there's my sort of footprint in tech media history. I don't think I have access to that 30 minutes because it was on, like I had a copy of it on DV Pro tape.
Oh my gosh.
Which I don't know if anyone who had a DV Pro deck or camera wasn't digitized.
You should get it digitized. If you still have it.
You know what? I wouldn't be surprised. I should search on YouTube. I wouldn't be surprised if someone put the first half hour of ZDTV on YouTube somewhere.
It's probably there. Everything else is on YouTube.
Well, the first songs from MTV are up somewhere on YouTube, although ZDTV doesn't have quite the legend that MTV has.
It's not quite in the same category, but for certain folks.
Being that it's not still around and MTV is still around.
Well, is it though? Is MTV really still around?
Not what it was when we watched it back in the day.
Yeah. There's a thing called MTV, but it's not MTV.
Let me tell you something. Can I tell you the moment that I knew I was turning into an old man? Here's the moment. I was watching MTV. Honest to God, these words came out of my mouth. I'm watching MTV and I said to myself, what are these stupid kids doing? I'm an old man now.
I mean, that's basically the kids these days.
That is the indicator.
Yep, done.
All right, let's bring out our guest. Thrilled to have our guest, Don. Good friend of yours, I know. I know you know him very well.
For quite some time.
He's the CISO of the Slack National Accelerator Laboratory, none other than Erwin Lopez. Erwin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Good to see you both. And Again, I remember the good old days of Tech TV and I remember watching you. So this is a big deal for me.
Is AI going to help us or hurt us?
Quote, LLMs and machine learning are merely the conduit through which benefits to the customer are delivered. Justin Warren from Pivot9 tried to cut through the AI hype, highlighting the advances in cyber are incremental, such as using Copilot for documentation or Krogel for better incident response policies. But GitHub's MCP server was recently exploited through basic prompt poisoning. Essentially, AI makes it easy for anything, good or bad, to suddenly hit scale. And that's kind of the history of the internet. So the question isn't whether AI helps or hurts, it's how do we separate those selling expensive ways to do the same old things from those actually solving valuable problems, which I don't know if it's expensive ways to do same old things. It might be same old things just at scale too, as well. Mike, yes?
Yeah, I think really we're in the early days right now. This is the experimentation phase, and that's really kind of where we need to live for a while. It's the same thing that we've done with cloud computing, the same thing with mobile devices. We're really experimenting right now. And some of the things that we find will be step-level improvements in our capabilities, the scale that you're talking about. Some of these things are going to fail spectacularly.
Mm-hmm.
Most are going to be somewhere in there. It'll be in between huge improvements and spectacular failures. But I really think the thing that we need to get comfortable with is the idea of experimentation. It's great to call out, hey, that failed. Hey, there was a vulnerability in the GitHub MCP service. We are going to see those as time go on, but we need to not let that stop the experimentation. We need to continue to try. Otherwise, we don't know how these things will be used. Like, it took a long time to figure out how to use a hammer.
For you, it took a long time, Mike?
I hit myself like, it hurt a few times when I was learning how to use a hammer. So
all right,
we're kind of in the hammer stage.
Let's throw this to Erwin. Erwin, there are a lot of pros and cons? Yes. Interested to know if, like, you see yourselves creating more sandboxes to essentially uncover the pros and cons. Yes?
I would agree with you. Yes. I mean, from our perspective, really AI is a force multiplier at the end of the day. It really, for us, it represents the evolution of what new security operations teams are going to be utilizing in terms of technologies, helping to not only synthesize data, looking at disparate data sets, and just trying to find that needle in the haystack, right? But it also comes with the downside at the end of the day, right? I mean, bad guys are going to be utilizing the same tools that we're trying to use against us. We open up our own attack surface to new types of vulnerabilities that are out there just because we might not have the experience of being able to test these new AI capabilities, right? Kind of like the GitHub MCP server and so forth. And also our user base utilizing things and entering more data than they should be entering into these public entities and so forth. So that makes it kind of hard for us. But let me share kind of a quick story about something that is near and dear to my heart. So this is not on the cybersecurity realm specifically, but it has to do with disparate data sets and so forth. I'm going through some health issues and so forth. And I ended up getting recently a CT scan and a PET scan. And I've been entering all of my data utilizing ChatGPT just to analyze the test results, imaging, and so forth. Again, at an anonymous level, I'm not entering my name or anything like that, just share information and so forth. And in the last PET scan that was identified, they came out and said that, there was what they call an attenuation error, where they found something, but when they took out the filter, it wasn't there anymore. So they labeled it as maybe system error, in terms of the imaging itself. But when I ended up putting into ChatGPT, it gave me a lot of different options based on the disparate data sets that were out there. And it said, hey, you know what? There could be a blood clot somewhere in your liver. Okay. That ended up giving me the option to basically talk to my doctor and say, hey, guess what? Could I get a liver MRI? Which actually led to a real diagnosis that I did have a blood clot in my liver.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So this was critical for us.
Wow. So you used AIM LLMs to self-diagnose and find something the doctor could not find.
Correct.
That's unbelievable.
And that was just to just have the right conversation with the doctor to be able to get that test done. Otherwise, I would have had to wait it.
And also to get that hold of that data yourself. No one thinks to literally take the data from a report and stick it into a computer to give it any answer whatsoever.
Correct.
That's amazing you even thought to do that.
So I've been utilizing it to keep track of all of my tests from now on. And I'm not saying, we're not trying to go towards a Google doctor of the future or anything like that, right? But these are just gives us the ability to have good conversations with the doctor and openness.
Right. And that's a really good point to make, because one of the jokes I make about using the internet to try to self-diagnose is what you use is you really just search for things, and they give you a laundry list of issues, and all of a sudden your paranoia, sets off. But you were taking your own data and trying to understand it, which is very, very different than the way most people use the internet for health purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Why are CISOs leaving the profession?
Cybersecurity is a dynamic, challenging field. But what happens when you've done it all? And the biggest challenge becomes convincing your own organization to care. Quote, I got tired of convincing people on the importance of security. That's from a CISO in the cybersecurity subreddit who's tired of constantly having to sell security's value to people who don't want to hear it. I'm sure neither of you have ever run into that problem. Now, some commenters didn't want to hear it, calling it a first world problem and to retire, telling the person to retire. But other commenters gave them more grace, with one saying, quote, you will only know when you are in that situation. It's not arrogance or ignorance. It's a disappointment, frustration, identity crisis, and burnout. So is CISO boredom? I don't know if I'd call it boredom, although irritation actually the work itself, or is it about endlessly repeating the same conversations with people who do not want to listen, which I know is kind of a core part of the job of being a CISO, Aaron, right?
I would agree with you. I mean, the constant need to sell security and translate risk for the business is exhausting sometimes, because you're having to repeat yourself multiple times, and it's just iterative scale of just the same thing over and over and over again. But I see this as only one part of the job. There's still a lot other things that really kind of motivate me personally as a CISO, right? Being able not only to improve the program itself, build it, right? Also stand up maybe a new research capability within our own team to be able to kind of harness all these new technologies that are coming up. At the same time, for me personally, staying connected to the technical expertise that I came from, right? Being able to maybe at times help out on incidents when I do have time, which is rarely available, but whenever I can, I do. And, kind of quench that hunger that I have for that technical capability. And that really what keeps me motivated to continue to move forward. But I would agree with you. I see why people are burning out, because they're having to have that same conversation over and over and over again. They feel that it's not moving any forward as such.
All right, Mike, I know one of the things that you've said to get people to care is to make it as personal as possible. Does that always work? Or I'm going to assume some people still don't care.
At the end of the day, it is our job to care about cybersecurity. That is the role that we take. And absolutely, it's frustrating to talk to people and keep telling them the same thing and keep telling them that, hey, this behavior, it's going to lead to a bad outcome. But we're not the only ones who face that. Like, this is not a unique problem to cybersecurity. Doctors, that's very much what they're doing.
Oh, my dad used to complain all the time, my dad who was a doctor, about his patients who wouldn't take their medicine. Drove him crazy.
Exactly. And so that's the exact same thing that we're dealing with here. And so this isn't unique to cybersecurity. This is something that I understand burnout, and I understand how challenging that can be to go through, but we're not going to change human nature. So we need to find our mechanisms to cope with it. We need to take a step back, take a vacation, recognize that this is just how humans are. And we need to figure out how to work with that, not continuing to beat our head against the wall and being mad that people aren't doing what we tell them to. So I appreciate burnout. I appreciate that it happens. It sucks that it happens. But what I would encourage everyone to do is just some self-care, figure out how to deal with it, because you're not going to change it.
Before we go on any further, I do want to tell you about our spectacular sponsor, and that is ThreatLocker. Now, let me tell you, even the most reliable employees make mistakes. An unauthorized USB device or an accidental click can actually expose sensitive data and create serious risk. It can be that simple. Now, traditional user-based access controls rely on trust, but trust isn't security. So ThreatLocker takes a different approach in securing your environment. They do it by enforcing program-based policies. It ensures only approved applications can access, read, or copy data. Sensitive files stay locked down while approved software continues to run without disruption. And when exceptions are necessary, administrators can approve them in seconds, keeping productivity high without sacrificing protection. Also, with ThreatLocker, every action is logged in a detailed audit to capture the exact user, file, application, and device serial number. This is actually zero trust in action. This is how it works. It's precise, it's enforceable, and it's simple to manage. Discover how ThreatLocker can help you gain more control over your environment. Just go to their website and check it out. Go to this website, threatlocker.com, easy to spell, threatlocker.com, spelled the way it sounds, threatlocker.com/CISO. Do me a favor, add the /CISO. It's the simplest way to let them know that you heard about ThreatLocker from us, the CISO series. threatlocker.com/CISO.
It's time to play What's Worse?
All right, Erwin, you know how this game is played, right?
Yes.
2 bad scenarios. You have to pick which one's worse. But I will make Mike answer first, and you can agree or disagree with him. It comes from Jason Kierstead, who's currently working over at Symbian. And here are the 2 scenarios. Scenario number 1, Mike.
Okay.
You find out your product team has been using an AI provider that your team did not vet. What's more, that provider just had a breach. You don't know what, if any, confidential data was sent to the provider, nor how they protect it.
Okay.
All right, so who knows what happens? That's scenario A. Scenario B, you find out your product team has rolled out your own AI feature. The bad news, you found this out because it looks like the AI was breached through a prompt injection attack. You don't know yet what, if any, confidential data was exposed. All right. I want to point out that usually you go for the thing that you know more about, but in both cases, you don't know what was exposed. So you can't lean on that, Mike, for this one.
At the same time, it's all relative, right?
Yes.
So one is just, again, to make sure that I understand the scenario and to also think it through.
Mm-hmm.
One is your company is using a third-party LLM.
Correct. And you don't know how data is being handled.
People are sending something to it.
Yes.
And then a breach happened and
correct.
So on and so forth. The other is you've developed one yourself.
Right.
And it has been breached and you don't know what's been exposed.
It's more or less breach within your 4 walls or outside of your 4 walls.
Exactly. And so the way that I think about this is, what is the potential reputation impact of this? Like, again, bad scenarios, like great examples, Jason, like these both suck. But if I think about it's somebody else's breach or it's my breach, while the data might be the same, the reputation impact is going to be greater if it's my breach. And that's what makes the headlines, is my company is breached versus this other company was breached.
Now, let me also, I think there's a good argument against that too. Erwin, do you agree or disagree with Mike?
I agree to a certain point. I think there's a little bit more to it, specifically given the fact that if it's my breach, it could lead to other nefarious activities like lateral movement and so forth, depending on what the capabilities were for the LLM and how it was cordoned off. So one could be worse than the other.
Well, hold it. Now I'm going to throw this out. If it's your breach, yes, that's a reputation impact. But at the same time, it's your 4 walls. You conceivably could manage it better. If it's outside of your 4 walls, it's out of your hands. Who the heck knows? Or you could look at it, it's a breach. It's out of our hands anyways here.
Well, again, if we're back to, we don't know what data is within either.
Right. In both situations.
In both situations, then the impact to data is the same at the end of the day, because it's basically everything for all that you know. But I really think Erwin makes a really great point, and it's not one that I thought of. If it's within your own 4 walls, it could be even greater than just the prompt injection, because it could spread within your environment and become an even bigger breach than just the information that the LLM had access to.
Good point. So agreement, but disagreement on how bad it is, I think is what it is. But you come to agree with them. Now, I was just thinking, we've been doing what's worse scenarios for more than 7 years. Have you actually had an incident in the last 7 years that mimicked one of the what's worse scenarios we've had?
I can't think of any.
I know it'd be hard to catalog, because there's been literally hundreds of them.
Yeah, there's literally hundreds of what's worse that we've been through. But part of that is because these tend to intentionally be extreme.
Although every now and then we get one who goes, "Oh yeah, this happens all the time," kind of a thing. It's like, yeah.
And those are the ones that are more likely, but the majority of them are intentionally extreme so that we can really have a nuanced debate.
Mm-hmm.
Because if one is extreme and the other one isn't, then it becomes easy. So
yes, well, that's true. That's the thing. If you send them in, by the way, please send in more what's worse scenarios. We're always looking for good ones.
Please.
Yeah, you're always looking back, and they could be balanced weak or balanced extreme. They don't have to both be extreme. Two balanced, quote, weak ones, I'm using that relative, is also still a very good what's worse scenario.
Yeah, I think those are actually the ones that make us squirm more. Because it's, that hits a little bit too close to home. That actually could happen. Now we have to have a real debate about it versus the extremes.
Erwin, in times that you've listened, have you ever heard of what's worse scenario and goes, yep, that happened to me?
In the past, yes.
Can you recall anything?
Not at the top of my head, but I remember a few times that it actually kind of came up. That I was like, oh, great. Yeah, I think we've gone through that. I mean, we've all gone through big incidents in the past where somebody's clicked on something and things moved laterally as such and took us a little bit of time to identify before we actually ended remediating. So
I remember years ago, Mike, we had a scenario that a woman sent in that was an actual incident that she dealt with, and they were faced with two issues. And one of them was letting the attacker keep going on so the FBI could track them. And the other one was to shut them down to stop the bleeding. And it was one of those what's worse scenarios. And I would love it if our audience have some of these locked and ready to send to us. But it was one of those what's worse scenarios where I could tell the answer to the story at the end. Like you got to pick which one to go with. And I said, and the end of the story is this. And by the way, the end of the story in that case was they did let the attacker go on so the FBI could track them. And I remember you and Sunil, who was on that, and you gave each other a high five because we recorded in my house. I remember that.
Well, that you've got a better memory than I do, David. But absolutely, that is something that if ever you're dealing with a real adversary, that is a decision you have to make.
It's a tough one. I mean, like
that's a real one.
You don't want them to keep, but I will just say, I'm sure that hurts. By the way, Andy Ellis had a similar experience where he was working with the FBI. He had an adversary that was working for him. He had to keep putting him on the payroll so the FBI could track him. It's even worse.
Yep, that's painful.
You got to look at the person every day.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, that's a serious poker face you need to hold on to. Too.
I don't want to play poker with Andy.
Once again, we've got identity issues.
Quote, threat actors aren't hacking in anymore, they're logging in. That's by Tom Etheridge from CrowdStrike in a recent CISO Online piece. By the way, he's not the first one to say that. Many have said that. But we've heard it many times, yet attackers can establish a foothold and start moving laterally through networks before most secure teams even know they're there. That is a major problem. So traditional static defenses like regular passwords and perimeter firewalls just aren't effective as they used to be. If attackers are walking through the front door with stolen credentials, what's the new playbook look like, Erwin?
So we use the assume breach high fidelity surveillance to start out with. I mean, basically, we understand that the traditional hardened perimeter, where hard and crusty on the outside, soft and chew on the inside, no longer works, right? I mean, basically, bad guys are coming in fairly simple. So utilizing a multi-factor authentication that's phish resistant, utilizing our specific tool sets internally to be able to identify. So like, for example, our EDR capability plus identity protection and our honeypots that we have set up to kind of detect that lateral movement as such are things that are really kind of come to help us quite a bit. In addition to that, having our specific business rule sets that we have set up to identify abnormal behavior from users is something that we have been concentrating on for the last couple of years. But again, it's really the focus has now become the inside and how do we protect from a zero trust capability, right? Assume basically breach, verify everything that's going on from the inside itself.
All right. Mike, I throw it to you. It seems this kind of new playbook is not so new anymore. It's pretty well known, yes?
Oh, there's basically these actors out there that they're called initial access brokers. And all they do is go around and collect credentials. They collect credentials, they collect session tokens, what have you, and then they sell them. And that's been going on for years now. And there have been so many breaches who've happened because of somebody bought a credential from one of these. So this is not at all new.
By the way, are those initial access brokers, are they ever taken down? Because it seems they're very much removed from the actual attack.
They are usually somebody who has a strain of malware that they've managed to get spreading. And quite often those particular types of malware will be taken down.
Well, more I was thinking like cybercrime is kind of a low risk, high reward type venture. But I was thinking people who are in that aspect of cybercrime, selling the credentials, are often probably kind of removed from any sort of, I guess, criminal prosecution. Yes or no? I don't know.
I don't think they're the ones that law enforcement goes after first.
No, but it would just be a good for, this is like going to the source.
Yes.
Let's find out who's making the drugs. Let's start with them and then getting the dealer on the street.
Well, it's, how do you deal with your precursors rather than the actual drug manufacturers themselves? There have absolutely been some takedowns of them.
Okay. All right.
But I think they are generally harder to get to.
Oh, I would assume so.
For the exact reason that you're saying is they're not the ones who are doing the actions on objectives. And therefore, they're not as loud and as visible to law enforcement and leaving as much of a trail.
Are we creating more problems?
Quote, we build, we bond, and we can't bear to let go. That's a good summation of the IKEA effect from Steve Thompson of TJX Companies. We tend to overvalue things we've created ourselves, even to our detriment. Ross Hawley-Luke of Venture and Security noted that security professionals often fall in love with their custom SIM rules, SOAR playbooks, and detection logic. They spend months crafting even when better off-the-shelf solutions emerge. Thompson lived this firsthand, spending 3 years trying to move his organization off a creaking on-prem Splunk deployment. The problem was the emotional investment in all those custom configurations made change feel impossible. Letting go felt like admitting their work was worthless. So, Mike, as someone I know who likes to engineer first, you are very much in a build yourself when it comes to build versus buy. How do you determine when you need to reevaluate your decision to build? And have you ever ripped out something you and your team spent forever developing?
Absolutely. You have to make the reasoned decision in a build versus buy scenario. Right? I'm not going to go and write my own EDR. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But at the same time, there are other areas where I get value that it is first build the thing, and then that pays off for years down the road. And those are the ones where we make we should go build this scenario.
No, but have you literally taken something down that you built yourself?
Oh, yeah. You have to. You have to say, hey, this thing has outlived its usefulness.
And does it hurt?
No.
Because it's like you watch your child grow up and it's like, oh, okay, well.
So you mentioned Sunil Yu earlier.
Yeah.
And years ago, he introduced me to this term of pets versus cattle.
We did this on our show. I think he introduced it to both of us at the same time on the show.
Yes. And that's something that has always stuck with me. And these things that we go and build internally, we have to think of them as cattle. when they outlive their usefulness, it's time to move on. We shouldn't be attached to them.
I think the term you want to use is slaughter.
I did not want to use that term. But going back to the scenario of the rules within Splunk, that's not an example of build. That is an example of lock-in to a vendor that you bought. Like, that is actually one of the downsides of buy, that you have to go into those decisions being very clear on. If those rules had been written in a portable fashion that were easy to move on, they wouldn't have been stuck on that on-prem Splunk environment. So sometimes buy actually is the one that's more difficult to move on from than a build scenario.
All right. Erwin, I'm sure you faced this problem yourself. And did you ever feel pain getting rid of something you and your team built?
Sometimes it's hard. I mean, I'll be honest, you put a lot of love and emotion and time into this, right? I mean, these are solutions that have gone through battle scars, right? From past incidents, business intelligence you've added to it and so forth. And then when it really starts to become a problem is when you start to have to pay the maintenance tax on it. How long is it taking to upgrade or keep up? Right? What is the total cost of ownership of this? Right? And then lastly is, do we have a single point of failure? Meaning how many people are actually managing the system, right? Do we only have one person or two people, right? And that's really where, for us, we make that decision to say, okay, well, maybe it might be time for us to look at an external solution that we might be able to basically move our rule sets and so forth. But during that time frame, it can be very painful. And I've had lots of experience going through that.
And I want to talk about this just in general about rip and replace, because I was having this conversation over at Black Hat. We've all faced a moment of rip and replace, and you see a better solution, but sometimes you think to yourself, is it really that much better? Would it really make it? And you sort of hold out, and then you realize the getting better and how bad is sort of that gap is widening even more. And you're like, okay, well, now we have to do it. And then you also have the fear of making that leap because you know how much work it's going to take to do it. But once you get onto the other side, you've done the work, you get to the other side, you've replaced the thing that was kludgy, that wasn't allowing you to do it. You look back and you think, why didn't I do this earlier? Yes, Erwin, have you had that feeling?
Well, we have. There have been times that, we've gone through it. I mean, good example, we had a great SIM capability that we had created, that we had gone through, that's gone through multiple different iterations, and we've basically kept that up for years. And just because it took a lot to keep this up and running, we ended up moving into, for example, a Splunk capability, right? That made it a lot easier, right? And gave us greater visibility to be able to not only search, but also utilize it as a pre-SIEM tool.
Well, excellent. Well, that brings us to the very end of this episode. I want to thank you. Erwin Lopez, who's the CISO over at the Slack National Accelerator Laboratory, joined us. That was fantastic, Erwin. We'd love to have you back again.
I'd love to be back. And again, thank you for the invitation.
Of course. And Mike, thanks for making the introduction to Erwin as well. And I want to thank our sponsor. That would be ThreatLocker. They've been a phenomenal sponsor of the CISO series, delivering zero trust in action. Remember, go to their website, threatlocker.com/CISO. Remember to add that /CISO. Easiest way to let them know that you found out about ThreatLocker from the CISO series. Thank you again, Mike. Thank you, Erwin. And thank you to our audience. We greatly appreciate your contributions. Keep them coming. More What's Worse scenarios and listening to the CISO series.
That wraps up another episode. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do. We have lots more shows on our website, CISOseries.com. Please join us on Fridays for our live shows, Super Cyber Friday, our virtual meetup, and Cybersecurity Headlines Week in Review. This show thrives on your input. Go to the Participate menu on our site for plenty of ways to get involved, including recording a question or a comment for the show. If you're interested in sponsoring the podcast, contact David Spark directly at david@CISOseries.com. Thank you for listening to the CISO Series podcast.